All right, welcome to our deep dive today. And today we're going to be looking at the art of staying calm. World of chaos. It's based on a summary from the Good Books YouTube channel, and I think this is something we all kind of need a little bit these days.
Yeah, for sure. It's a timely topic for sure. The world feels pretty turbulent these days, just everything coming at us from every direction.
Right, and the audiobook starts with this really interesting visual. Imagine like someone just totally zen, standing on a cliff during a massive storm, waves crashing, wind howling, the whole 9 yards. Are you that calm person? Or are you like about to get blown off the cliff?
That's a great visual. It kind of gets right to the heart of it. It's not about whether the storm hits, but how well you weather it.
Exactly. And one of the first things this audiobook argues is that chaos itself is actually neutral. It's not good or bad, inherently. It's our reaction to it that determines whether it throws us off course or maybe even helps us.
That's a really crucial point, I think. Because I think our first instinct is to label chaos as like a negative, a threat. But think about it. Some of the most innovative businesses were born out of chaotic times, like the Great Depression, for example, or even more recently, the way companies like Uber and Airbnb emerged from economic disruption to meet, new needs.
Oh, so they actually thrive because they kind of embrace that chaos instead of trying to fight it.
Precisely. And that kind of leads us to another big idea from the audiobook, the illusion of control. That very human desire to plan everything, to manage every detail.
Oh, tell me about it. I'm a total planner.
Uh,
But I also know how frustrating it is when things inevitably go off the rails.
Of course, because let's face it, life rarely goes according to plan. Think about the 2008 financial crisis. Like, nobody saw that coming. Or even something as simple as a canceled flight ruining your, carefully planned vacation. The more we cling to this illusion of control, the more anxious we get when reality throws us a curveball.
And for those of you out there who, like me, love to have a plan but hate feeling overwhelmed, listen up. Because this is where the audiobook gets really practical. It starts offering actual techniques for practicing acceptance in the face of chaos.
The first one they talk about is the mindful pause. That moment when something stressful happens and you feel that surge of panic? This technique is about resisting that knee-jerk reaction. Instead, take a deep breath, pause, actually assess the situation before you spiral.
It's like hitting the mental reset button, right? I can definitely see how that would be helpful in those moments where it feels like everything's about to explode.
Absolutely. And then there's focus shifting. This one's great for when you're feeling totally overwhelmed by the sheer volume of chaos. The idea is to deliberately shift your focus to a smaller, more manageable task. It could be something as simple as organizing your desk or responding to a few emails.
So you're basically tricking your brain into feeling productive.
Yeah.
Which then gives you the momentum to tackle the bigger stuff.
Exactly. It's about creating small wins to build up your resilience. And another technique they highlight is flexible thinking. Instead of getting stuck in that this shouldn't be happening mindset, you ask yourself, how can I adapt to this new reality?
Ooh, like those businesses that pivoted during COVID. Restaurants suddenly offering delivery, universities switching to online classes. They didn't waste time wishing things were different. They just figured out how to make it work.
That's the spirit. It's about finding solutions within the chaos, rather than getting stuck in a loop of complaining about what you've lost. And then there's the day reset, which I think we've all probably done instinctively at some point. Those days where it feels like everything that can go wrong does go wrong.
Oh, I know those days all too well.
Well, the day reset is about giving yourself permission to mentally start over from that point forward. Instead of carrying the weight of all the day's mishaps, you decide to approach the rest of the day with a fresh perspective.
I like that. It's like drawing a line in the sand and saying, okay, that was rough, but we're moving on now. All of these techniques sound very helpful, but I'm guessing you're listening and thinking, okay, easier said than done, right? How do I actually apply this in my crazy life?
That's where the power of small steps comes in. The audiobook makes this point that even in the midst of massive chaos, tiny actions can have a huge cumulative effect over time. You don't have to solve everything at once. It's like building the pyramids, Those ancient Egyptians didn't just snap their fingers and poof, giant pyramid. They moved one stone at a time, consistently over years. And eventually, they created something incredible. Or think about any successful person, really. Stephen King didn't write all his bestsellers in a single sitting. He built his career on a consistent daily writing habit, small steps day after day.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is that completing even small tasks releases dopamine in our brains. It's that feel-good chemical that motivates us to keep going, so you're not only making progress, but also reinforcing that positive feedback loop.
So even amidst the chaos, you can create a sense of accomplishment and control just by focusing on those small wins, which then makes you even more resilient for tackling the bigger challenges.
Now, that's an important point to remember when we talk about this next concept, chaos as a driver of progress. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but stick with me here.
Yeah, we tend to think of chaos as purely destructive, right? So how could it possibly lead to progress?
Well, look at history. Some of the biggest breakthroughs have emerged from really disruptive times. Take Isaac Newton, for example, during the Great Plague of London. He was forced to isolate himself at home. Universities were closed. Everything was in turmoil.
Talk about chaos, a pandemic shutting down society. We could all relate to that a little too well after the last few years.
Exactly. But it was during that chaotic period of isolation that Newton made some of his most groundbreaking discoveries in physics and math. He developed the theory of gravity-explored optics and made advancements in calculus. It was a period of intense creativity fueled by the disruption of his normal routine.
Wow, so the chaos actually created space for him to see things in a new light and make those connections.
And then, of course, think about how many businesses thrived because they were able to adapt to chaotic situations. The audiobook mentioned Airbnb and Uber, again, both emerged from economic downturns.
Yeah, they were able to identify unmet needs and quickly adapt to fill those gaps. It's almost like the chaos forced them to be more creative and resourceful.
So the takeaway here is that instead of fearing chaos, what if we saw it as a potential catalyst for growth, both for us personally and for society as a whole?
Okay, but how do we actually make that shift? How do we go from feeling overwhelmed by chaos to seeing it as a potential opportunity?
That's where mindfulness comes in. I know for some of you that might sound a little woo-woo, but trust me, this audiobook presents it in a really practical way.
Yeah, it's not about sitting on a mountaintop meditating for hours on end.
Exactly. It's simply about being present in the moment without getting swept away by worries about the future or regrets about the past. Because when we're constantly reacting to every little thing, we're not really in control. We're just letting the chaos dictate our emotions.
We're back to that image of being tossed around in the storm, right? We need to be the calm captain, not the panicked passenger.
Exactly. And the audiobook offers some simple techniques for cultivating that mindfulness. One, they emphasizes mindful breathing. I know it sounds basic, but think about it. How often do you actually stop and pay attention to your breath?
I'll admit, not often enough, but I can see how focusing on something as simple and steady as your breath could be really grounding in a chaotic moment.
It really is. It gives you something stable to focus on amidst the turbulence. And another technique is mindful observation of thoughts. This is about noticing the thoughts that pop into your head without judging them or getting caught up in them.
So instead of spiraling into a what-if tornado, you're just observing those thoughts as they come and go like clouds passing by.
Precisely by doing this, you create space between your thoughts and your reactions. You're not at the mercy of every anxious thought that pops up. You have the power to choose how you respond.
Which, when you think about it, is really what this whole staying calm in chaos thing is all about, right?
Yeah.
It's not about pretending the chaos isn't there. It's about developing the inner strength to handle it.
No.
It's about building that resilience.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And you know what? The audiobook argues that mindfulness can actually help you make better decisions when you're under pressure. It helps you manage stress more effectively, and it can even improve your overall well-being.
Because if you're not constantly reacting from a place of fear and anxiety, you can tap into a much deeper sense of clarity and purpose, even when things are going crazy around you.
Now that brings us to one of the most interesting and maybe even a bit philosophical concepts from the audiobook, the energy of chaos.
Okay, I'm intrigued. This sounds like we're getting to some deep stuff here.
It is a little more abstract, but stick with me. The idea here is that chaos, while seemingly destructive, actually contains a tremendous amount of energy, and that energy, if harnessed correctly, can be a powerful force for transformation and growth. Think about it like a volcano.
Okay, I'm following.
The eruption itself is chaotic, destructive even, but what happens afterward? New life emerges from the fertile volcanic ash. That's the power of chaos. It forces us to rebuild, adapt, and ultimately become more resilient.
I love that analogy. So it's not about eliminating chaos from our lives, but about learning how to channel that chaotic energy into something positive.
Exactly. And the audiobook relates this concept to both our personal lives and to wider shifts in society.
So like how periods of upheaval often lead to innovation and breakthroughs, like what we were talking about with Newton.
Precisely. Or think about how the pandemic forced businesses to completely rethink their models Some were devastated, of course, but others were able to leverage that chaos to reinvent themselves and come out stronger on the other side.
So the key is learning to recognize that potential within the chaos, rather than just getting overwhelmed by the disruption.
Now you're getting it, and the audiobook offers some practical techniques for doing just that. That one is to view chaos as a challenge rather than a threat.
So instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You ask, how can I use this to learn and grow?
Exactly. And another technique is to focus on transforming the energy of that chaos into something constructive.
Okay, I'm not totally sure I'm following you on this one. Can you give me an example of what that looks like?
Sure. Let's say you experience a major setback in your career. Your first reaction might be fear, disappointment, anger, all totally normal feelings. But instead of letting those emotions paralyze you, what if you asked yourself, okay, how can I use this experience to fuel my next move? What new opportunities might open up because of this change?
So you're basically taking that raw, chaotic energy and channeling it in a new direction. It's like alchemy, turning something seemingly negative into something valuable.
Now you're getting it, and the audiobook argues that this ability to harness the energy of chaos is essential not just for navigating the external world, but also for our own personal growth.
Because let's be honest, when we're constantly trying to control everything, maintain order, and stick to a rigid plan, are we really experiencing life to the fullest? We might be missing out on the potential for change and transformation that comes from embracing the unknown.
Right, there's a great quote by the philosopher Alan Watts that really sums this up. The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance.
I love that. So it's not about eliminating chaos from our lives. It's about learning to dance with it, to become more comfortable with the fact that life is full of ups and downs and unexpected turns.
Now you're speaking my language, and this audiobook gives you some concrete tools to do, just that we've covered a lot of ground here already. The illusion of control, the power of small steps, mindfulness techniques, chaos as a driver of progress.
It's a lot to digest, but I feel like I'm starting to see how it all fits together.
It's like assembling a puzzle, right? Each piece on its own might not make much sense, but as you start putting them together, you see the bigger picture.
So for those of you listening who are feeling that pull toward calm amidst the storm, the question is, how do we actually start putting all of this into practice? How do we find that harmony in the midst of the inevitable chaos of life?
It's a great question, and the audiobook actually gives a beautifully simple but powerful answer. It's about finding harmony in the chaos, not about eliminating it, but about finding your own peace within it.
Okay, I can already hear some of you saying, that sounds lovely, but come on, is it really possible to feel calm and centered when it feels like everything around you is falling apart?
That's where they use this really clever analogy of the ocean. Imagine you've got the most skilled captain, a strong, sturdy ship, but if they try to fight the storm directly, they're probably going to capsize.
So it's not about pretending the storm isn't there or trying to force it to just disappear.
Right, the experienced captain knows that storms are part of being on the ocean. They don't waste energy wishing it wasn't happening. They learn to navigate it. They use their skill and knowledge to work with the wind and waves to get where they need to go.
So relating that back to our own lives, it sounds like step one is accepting that chaos is going to happen. We can't control external events, but we can control how we react to them.
Exactly, and that acceptance doesn't mean giving up or becoming passive. It means acknowledging reality and choosing to work with it instead of against it.
Okay, acceptance is the starting point. What comes next?
Mindfulness, and here's the thing, it's not about turning into some emotionless robot who never gets stressed or upset. It's about developing the awareness to notice those emotions, the fear, anxiety, frustration, whatever comes up, and choosing how you respond to them instead of letting them run the show.
So that pause we were talking about earlier, that breath, that moment of just observing before we react, that's where this all starts.
Precisely along with that mindfulness, the audiobook stresses focusing on what you can control, because when things are chaotic, it's so easy to feel helpless, like you're just a tiny boat in a hurricane.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well.
But even in those overwhelming situations, there are always things you can influence. Maybe it's your attitude, your effort, the way you choose to approach a particular task. Focusing on those small areas of control helps you regain a sense of agency.
And then, and maybe this is the most challenging part, there's the idea of actually finding opportunities within the chaos.
Now that's where things get exciting. It's like completely flipping the script on how we usually view disruption. Instead of only seeing the negative, what if we asked ourselves, what might this open up? what can I learn here? How could this help me grow?
It's like what we were saying about Newton and the plague.
Right.
Sometimes those forced periods of disruption end up leading to the most unexpected breakthroughs.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the concept of resilience, which isn't about becoming some superhuman who never gets knocked down. It's about developing the strength and flexibility to bounce back from setbacks, learn from mistakes, and keep moving forward even when things get tough.
So putting it all together, it sounds like finding harmony in chaos is less about reaching a specific destination and more about shifting your approach to life.
That's a great way to put it. It's about embracing change, seeing challenges as opportunities to grow, and finding that inner peace even when the storms hit, because they inevitably will.
I love it. So for all of you listening who are ready to give this a shot, who want to be that calm person on the cliff, what's one small step you can take today to start practicing this idea of harmony in chaos?
Honestly, the most powerful thing you can do is simply start paying attention.
Right.
Notice how you react when things don't go according to plan. Are you resisting panicking, getting swept up in that negativity? Or are you taking a breath, observing your thoughts and feelings, and maybe even starting to look for the opportunity within the disruption?
So building that self-awareness, because you can't change what you're not aware of, right?
Exactly. And even that simple act of noticing can be so empowering because it reminds you that you always have a choice in how you respond to the chaos. You can let it overwhelm you, or you can choose to become the captain of your own ship, navigating the waves with skill and grace.
So your homework, should you choose to accept it, pay attention to your reactions this week. See if you can find even a tiny moment of harmony in the midst of your own chaos. And remember, even the smallest steps can lead to incredible transformations over time. That's it for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
Until then, be well and embrace the chaos of